if I have configurations coming from 3, 4, 5 different places, that's actually an attack surface in itself.
Why do I need EPM? How's that going to make my life as an admin a little bit easier? So you used to be on the dark side of things. You used to actually be out there consulting, implementing this stuff, and now you've made that switch to actually building it, designing it.
Our goal here is to make sure that people can run as standard user, and then to selectively allow certain things to elevate when they need to.
The big new capabilities that we have with Intune now is the licensing has now changed, and we've now got different plans of Intune, and we've got this group of new capabilities called the Intune Suite.
It's always like, hey, Microsoft should just do this, right?
Hey folks, Campbell here for ThreatCast. Today I'm going to be chatting with Matt Call, who's the Principal PM at Microsoft, and we're going to be chatting about all things to do with security settings management in Defender for Endpoint and a whole bunch of Intune security features. So let's go. Matt, thank you for joining us. Good to see you.
Yeah, nice to see you too, Rue. Thanks for having me on the podcast. Happy to talk security with you guys and have a little conversation about what we're building and why we're building it.
Awesome. Sounds good. And listen, I guess before we get into the weeds, because I got a lot of really dorky, geeky little questions to ask you, maybe give folks a little bit of a background into what you do at Microsoft and then how you ended up where you are as well, because I always find that interesting how folks kind of stumble into the role they're in.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll try not to dox myself here, but I've been at Microsoft for roughly 13 or so years. I started in our consulting business on, I guess it would have been SMS 2.0, maybe ConfigMan 2007, doing operating system deployment. I then, as a result of some engagements that I had, transitioned to security pretty quickly and, worked with MCS, Microsoft Consulting Services, for a long time. From there, I worked on our customer engagement team, our CAT team, for the Intune feature set, focusing on Windows deployment and, things like that. And then I've been on the Intune engineering team now for almost 4 years, operating mostly in the Windows security space and in the deployment management of Windows for the most part.
So you used to be on the dark side of things. You used to actually be out there consulting, implementing this stuff, and now you've made that switch to actually building it, designing it, all that kind of good stuff. How do you find that transition?
I think the one thing that I would say is when I look at feedback online and like feedback from other people, it's always like, hey, Microsoft should just do this, right? Like they should just do this one thing, right? And I think one thing that I've learned on my journey from customer, because before I joined Microsoft, I worked in the healthcare field, doing config manager stuff and doing app deployment and app packaging, to now where I am today, we're helping, our great team build features in Intune. It's never that easy, right? The span of just our customer set, the volume of customers we have, how one little change can impact so many different customers, so many different ways. I'd say, for me, it's been really eye-opening being able to work with the engineering team over the last 4 years. And then 2 or 3 years before that on our customer engagement team, just learning like what it takes to, take these small changes or make the right decision. We're meticulous and sometimes slower than people would like us to be with the rate of change that we have. But, for me, that's probably the most difficult part, or the most eye-opening part, was just how much thought actually goes into what we build and what we deploy on the management side, and how that can impact our customer base. But the journey's been awesome. When I started at Microsoft, like 13 years ago, whatever that date was, that was always sort of my goal, was to be in a role like I am now, where I can have the impact building our products. And it's sort of a dream to be here and to work with the great people I get to work with every day, who are really in it to make the world a better place. At least security side, I'm sure it's the same way, but the management side is pretty unique in that people depend on our products to feed their families. Like, yeah, I don't know if it's like this anywhere else inside of the IT community, but with Intune and with Configuration Manager, there are people whose entire careers have been sort of focused on just that one product set and are super passionate. And for me, it's just a dream to be able to help contribute to that. And, so many people care about the product set that it's really awesome to be able to contribute in that space.
That's a really good point. I remember, this is going back, I'm looking at the calendar now as if it's going to help me, but this is going back a little while now. I want to say probably pre-pandemic. And there was a video that Microsoft published, and it was to do with some kind of anniversary of Config Manager or Windows Server or something. And they were interviewing folks, and they were saying how this tool, Config Manager, has helped me kind of level up my career, right? And all of a sudden, I've gone from where I was to now where I am, where I wanted to be, and I've got a better income and all the rest of it. So that's the kind of an interesting point that you raised there, the human effect of these tools, right? Because, we use them to get the job done, but that job, kind of following up what we were talking about before the show, that's what helps you feed the family, right? So that's quite an interesting point, that kind of empathy that you have with your end users.
Yeah, you have to. I mean, oftentimes we'll get involved in, a small change that's really expensive, right? But when you actually sit and think about how that extra click or that extra thing that needs to be done to accomplish the task somebody's trying to do impacts, their life, like how many times or how much time they have to spend doing something on a reoccurring basis. I think that empathy is driven directly into our product team through engagements, through great conferences like, Workplace Ninja or MMS or any of the the MEM Summit, like all this stuff, right? And we try and be as active there as possible so we can learn from our customers how they're using our tools and products. And it's, like you said, it's baked into our organization's almost 30-year history as a constant in the management space. So yeah, it's super awesome, super exciting stuff.
Awesome. And yeah, I'm still touchy about MMS. I haven't been to MMS, but there's like 2 weeks every year where I look at Twitter or LinkedIn and I just get so much FOMO and jealousy and rage that I couldn't be there too. So that still stings.
Yeah. We're lucky that, we get to contribute to that space. We have a really good presence there. And it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun. You should come. It'll be a lot of fun.
Yeah. It's on the to-do list. And I'll tell you what, one thing I want to pick up there when we were talking about kind of the scale of the change that you guys might do, right? Because to me, it's like, Microsoft should just do this. I'm one guy sitting here and there are billions of endpoints that could potentially be affected by that one small change, right? And so the word just starts to do a lot of heavy lifting, right? And one of the key things that me being a kind of Defender person really has kind of learned and appreciated on the back of that is this new, I say new, it's not so new now, but this concept of security settings management, right? In Intune and Defender, where really previously we could use a whole bunch of management tools to control Defender settings on our clients. And now what we're starting to see is this kind of unification towards the Defender portal. But I know there's a ton of stuff that has to go on in the background to make all that work, right? Could you maybe give us the kind of the overview of, why was that such a big challenge and what were some of the hurdles you had to overcome to get that ball rolling?
Yeah, absolutely. This is probably one of my first projects that I contributed to on our team. It's not a one-person effort. We have a pretty large team across the management organization at Microsoft, as well as the Defender organization at Microsoft that contribute to this effort, and they're all fantastic. And for us, it started as sort of this effort to catch the fringe, right? We know that getting settings from multiple sources is problematic, and we know it's not deterministic. And we know that most of our organizations or people who are doing this, like you being in the security realm, if I have configurations coming from 3, 4, 5 different places, that's actually an attack surface in itself, right? Because I don't know, like as an end user or as an IT admin or a security admin, I don't know how my devices are configured, and I don't know how or where, what, I guess, is contributing to that configuration and who has their hands on the controls for that configuration, right? Especially when you start talking about things like exclusions or, ASR rules and exclusions on ASR rules, like you can really have an impact on the device's security posture pretty quickly if it's not clear to you where the security configuration is coming from. So roughly, I guess it was 4 years ago now, we started down this path of, hey, we know that Microsoft is good at the management side of the house. I mean, our history and configuration manager and now an Intune is showing us that we're pretty good at being a management fabric. And why don't we, instead of building a sort of a second solution to manage, or in this case, like a fifth solution to manage a device, right? Why don't we start building or bringing these two management fabrics together, or these two fabrics together, which was Intune at the time and Defender. And this sort of fell with some of our organizational goals as well, around driving together the IT and security persona. I mean, when I joined the team, I spent a lot of time, talking about, hey, how do we bring these two personas together? Because we can't have them operating in silos, especially out in the field, right? The minute a security team starts competing with an IT team for control or configuration of a device, this introduces the sort of animosity inside of most organizations that leads to the, I hate the management team or I hate the security team sort of rhetoric. And I'm sure you've been in customers in the past or maybe internally where, the sentiment doesn't really help you achieve your security goals. It might be a little bit of friction. So we decided to unify those two roles underneath the covers at the fabric. So, the advancements that some of my team has driven after I, got out of the day-to-day of the project, things like bringing together the authoring experiences for policies to the Intune and the MD console. So that way, we can meet admins where they are. They don't need to be, we don't need to teach security admins Intune and Intune admins the security console if they don't want to know it, right? This is sort of our driving factor around this. But, from a goals perspective or technical perspective, the issue really was never that hard. The issue was more of a challenge of, how do we get the MD client, the sense components on a device to, get the configuration it needs from Intune and then enforce that configuration. And that paired with our need to support down-level operating systems like Server 2012 R2 and Server 2016 really, made that a fun project to work on and help move that whole estate forward. Does that make sense?
It does, yeah. And I guess, it's one of the things that I describe as one of the reasons I kind of like playing with 365 as a whole, Intune, Purview, Defender, Entra, how all these things kind of tied together, is that to me it's almost, geez, this is a little bit crude, but it's almost like this big jigsaw and all the pieces are there and it's a case of joining them together. And it sounds like on the product team, you guys are kind of able to almost leverage that as well, right? It's kind of like, well, we've got Entra there where we can host devices. I know that Security Systems Management kind of get this concept of like a synthetic join or something like that, right? Where we can have that trust relationship to the service, and then Intune can pull from that, and then Security Settings Management can also pull from that. So I guess when you're working on this kind of thing, you're working not just with the Intune team, right? You're having to liaise with the Defender team, the Entra guys. It's team effort, I guess, right?
Oh, yeah. We have a virtual sort of team. Everybody loves a good V team, right? But we have a V team across all these different services. And, we sort of view our role, at least in the Intune organization or the management organization, as the glue that sort of holds us together for the device, right? And I think that that's a really important sort of designation to have because, for users or for the user identity or the user portion, Entra is really that glue, right? But for devices, so much goes into the device that sort of our service, our management service, contributes, whether it's securing it through security settings management, or it's determining the compliance state of the device, or it's using Defender to calculate risk and then calculate that into compliance and block out conditional access. For us, it's a constant integration story. It's a constant integration path between, pretty much the three core services of Entra, Defender, and Intune. And then, we work very closely with the Windows team as well to make sure that, we're building the right things on the Windows platform. The one thing that's unique about the MDM scenario for all MDM vendors is that we use that inbox set of Windows components to govern the management of the device. We have some additional components we put in place, things like the Intune management extension that we build ourselves, but the core of that communication for MDM on Windows is built into the stack. So we're constantly trying to make the ecosystem better, trying to make sure that devices are healthy and make sure that they're secured. And, it's like you said, it really is a sort of a team sport. Maybe I'm putting words in your mouth, but it is a team sport. And, it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work.
And so I guess kind of following up on that, you mentioned the implications on Windows, the side of it, right? So one of the big new capabilities that we have with Intune now is the licensing has now changed and we've now got different plans of Intune and we've got this group of new capabilities called the Intune Suite, right? Yeah. And one of the ones that I played around with a little bit is Endpoint Privilege Management, or EPM. So I'm getting the acronym and the phrasing correct there. And this is all about kind of, I guess you could say it's almost like just-in-time local admin access and things like that, right? But again, if I'm thinking out loud here, you guys, you can't just build that yourselves, right? So does this involve working with the Windows team and all sorts of other teams? How does, what's the origin story for something like EPM? And then how do you eventually get that to market?
Yeah, for the Intune Suite as a whole, not just EPM specifically, what we've sort of recognized over the last, 2 or 3 years as we were building Intune Suite was, the management space has sort of had the same core set or the same scope for a long time, right? Like apps, settings, patching, that sort of stuff, right? Like, the core management workloads. And what we've noticed with customers was, hey, customers need this sort of core set of solutions, right? In addition to management, right? Like it's not just management, and just management isn't enough to sort of work as an enterprise admin anymore, right? I need to take away local admin rights and use an EPM product like that. I need to have an app catalog that allows me to easily package and deploy applications so I can remove that burden, right? I need solutions like Cloud PKI or MAM Tunnel to help lower my administrative burden for those sensitive sort of activities around, managing VPN or managing certificates, all this sort of stuff. We need to lower the cost on it holistically as a community, right? Like I guess for me, I don't really want people sitting in a console managing a VPN concentrator all day or sitting in a console revoking certs, et cetera. Like we need to make that easier. So with the Intune suite, all these different products, and there's more, right? But just the examples that I gave and others, our goal was really to like, hey, let's build the next set of features we think are core for the enterprise as a management team. And we have a dedicated team inside of our organization. We grew to sort of support this effort. So that way, we're not going to force everybody to buy it or whatever, right? Through that, our normal Intune SKU, but it's there as sort of a step up for organizations that need to use this additional capability like EPM or whatever. So I was personally pretty involved with the EPM product set, but yeah, I mean, that core principle sort of holds true, and it's doing pretty well in the space, and we're iterating all the time. It's great to see, the capabilities that the team's adding all the time, not just in EPM, but across the core. I mean, it's really great to see the management expand.
Awesome. Yeah, and I guess in terms of kind of always moving forward with it, you guys just, for EPM, you guys just released the kind of the admin approval flow, right? There's this new kind of capability. Could you maybe talk folks through, like, if I'm in that position where, right, I'm finally starting to get rid of local admin access for all my end users, why do I need EPM? How's that going to make my life as an admin a little bit easier?
Yeah, so for us, we have a couple core principles we like to adhere to, but one thing is we want to keep it simple and we want to keep it compatible, right? If we look at other solutions or solutions in market, sometimes they get pretty complex. I mean, some people need that complex solution set. We're iterating over time to add more capabilities to our set. I think again, like we were saying before, I'm not sure what's public and what's not, but over the next, 3 months, you're going to see some new capabilities come in place that are long asked for in our product set. But our goal here is to make sure that people can run as standard user, and then to selectively allow certain things to elevate when they need to, right? Things like trusted installer, apps that you want to install but don't want to necessarily package. And then those one-time tasks are supported by, the support approved scenario, right? Like, hey, I'm an admin, or I'm a standard user on my device. I need to elevate this one time. I can launch, I can request this approval this one time. It's good on my device for me for 24 hours for this app. And then, I can do that without having a huge level of IT overhead to that. We're going to build on that more as we move forward. But that was sort of the goal with support approved was, hey, it's a key piece. Like, we don't want people to have to create rules all day for these one-off scenarios. The more rules you have, the more attack surface, right? The more things I trust to elevate, the greater the attack surface. So support approved was really about like, hey, allow me to do this one thing, this one time for these end users, and then, put them back to where they should be at standard user. And it's going over really well. We've seen a lot of usage on that specific flow since we released it. I think probably about, 2 months ago, a month ago? Again, time is a construct. I don't remember when we released it. So yeah, but yeah, it's been going really well.
Good stuff. Yeah, right there with you with the whole time thing. Ever since I started working from home all the time, it's like post-pandemic life is just as big a blur as during pandemic life. I don't know. It's lost all concept of space and time. And I tell you what, one of the things you just mentioned there is in EPM, you get this concept of kind of like rules and escalation rules. So again, when we think of Microsoft, we think of that history of supporting legacy, right? And the fact that I can take something that was designed for Windows 95, I can double click it and that thing's just going to run, right?
Yep.
A lot of back in the day, if we're looking back, 20 years ago, probably more than 20 years ago, a lot of these things may have been designed where they only get to run as a local admin and something like that.
Yeah.
So we can keep me honest here, but we can use EPM and say, well, the end user won't have to always be a local admin, but we can specify just for this old legacy app, it could run under local permissions. Is that one of the use cases?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we support 3 sort of use cases today: automatic, user confirmed, and support approved. Automatic is exactly what it sounds like. You specify a rule for a given binary, and every time that binary launches, it launches as admin, right? Every time. Then we have a user confirmed flow, and the user confirmed flow is very similar to what you get with Windows today, where you specify the rule, and the user has to either click like a simple yes, no, continue, cancel to elevate that binary, or you could have them require authentication or require justification, etc., to complete that elevation scenario. And then the last one is the support approved one, which we sort of walk through, which is similar to user confirm, but instead of providing a justification and then allowing the elevation, you provide the justification and then it needs approval from a outside entity to be able to elevate. So those are the sort of the three core scenarios that we support today. And then, from a team perspective, we're looking at expanding not just, what elevates or what can elevate. So scope, we're looking at things like how do we add more file types, et cetera. That'll be probably coming shortly here. But we're also looking at, how can we govern more user flows, in the right way, right? To be able to elevate things like, settings and old legacy MMCs and that sort of stuff, right? But we're trying to balance it out, It'd be very easy to just allow everything to elevate all the time and do standard user. But, for us, we're trying to make sure that we keep that bar in security really high and make sure that our end users can do what they need to do to use the product.
Good. I love it. And I'll tell you what, that kind of got me thinking there, because we're talking about kind of on the local device running with as few privileges as possible and then getting them when I need them. And I'll be honest, one of the things that when I'm talking with customers, I try to really encourage them to do is apply that same logic to Intune as the service, right? So it's like, we can use Intune to secure our devices, but you have to also consider the security of Intune itself, right?
Yeah.
And you've got things like policy sets and RBAC and things like that. Could you maybe talk about, if someone's watching or listening to this and they're kind of thinking, well, I've got 20,000 devices, I'm a big company, but I just use Intune admin or I just use global admin all the time. What are some good practices then to be the most secure Intune admin I could possibly be?
Yeah, I mean, Intune has a large span of control, just like any cloud service does, especially with the fact that we manage devices. And when you're an Intune admin, you effectively control the posture of your devices. Like the same thing when you're a config manager admin. This isn't a new concept or paradigm. This is just more or less how it works. I think, to your point, one of the biggest things I see customers do, especially in larger environments, 20,000 seats plus, is we see people running with overprivileged accounts. And it's really, one of the simplest things that you can do is run with reader until you need to make a change. Like it seems very simple, even if you're global reader, isolating your changes to either a secondary account that you would use or to using privilege identity management to PIM up, either with PIM for groups or whatever, right? Making sure that you aren't running with that full privilege all the time. And it's really important for the same reason why you wouldn't run with full privileges on other cloud services like M365, et cetera, because, in the same, sort of attack vectors that can exist for accessing your email can also be used to access whatever else you have privileges to, right? Like Intune or whatever else. So, you got to make sure that, for me, one of the biggest things I see customers do is, move to this reader model where, hey, if I'm just in Intune, browsing around, viewing reports, et cetera, let's run with an account that has read privileges. Let's not get create privileges. Like, let's make sure that we're restricting our permissions there. So, when we do need to use create, it's for a small period of time. And then the other thing is scoping inside of the console. We have this concept of scope in Intune, both in groups and in tags. Tags being what I can see and interact with, and groups being what I can assign to, making sure that admins have the right span of control for what they need to do, especially in your larger organizations. There's no reason maybe North America admin needs persistent access to deploy to European assets, right? Now, this is just a high level example. There may be use cases in your scenario that need that. But, my point is like, know what the separation of duties are, know what the span of control needs to be. And Intune has a pretty rich RBAC model that supports that. And, just don't take it for granted. As with any service that has the level of control that a management plane has, it's really important to make sure that your separation of duties and then running with least privilege all the time to reduce your attack surface. I mean, it sounds like overly simple that I'm sitting here talking about it, but man, the number of times I see people get on the phone with somebody and they'll go to show me something and they'll PIM up to global admin to use Intune. I'm like, guys, what are we doing? And this is nobody in particular. It's just, that sort of pattern I see exist. And you probably see it in your work as well. Yeah. With overprivileged accounts.
Yeah, it's true. And, the number of times I'll kind of crawl through the PIM logs, someone is reading them and it's me. So, and I'll see something like, just checking out blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, well, if you're just checking it out, did you really need to be global admin or Intune admin? Why couldn't you just use on like the global reader role, right? And it's, to me, I almost kind of look at it selfishly, like I'm protecting myself from accidentally breaking something, right?
Yeah.
And I guess in Intune, you've also got a few mitigations against that with things like multi-admin approval, right?
Yep.
Where it kind of maybe stops you going, get that sense check before anything serious happens. But again, you have to look at it from both the security side of view, but also just the practicality side of view, that this is like those little guardrails you get at the top of your stairs to stop the toddler running down the stairs. Well, that's kind of what reader roles are for you as an admin as well, just help you stop breaking stuff, which happens a lot to me anyway. So one of the other kind of thoughts going into this that I really want to ask you is, you guys, you and the Intune team, you're very active in the community. Mm-hmm. And in terms of, I don't want to say misconceptions about Intune, but in terms of things that if you had to recommend anything to an Intune admin, let's say, I just started being an Intune admin, I'm new at this, what would be the kind of some of the fundamental pieces of advice or tips that you would give? And I realize that's kind of how long is a piece of string, because Intune's a big product and there's a lot it can do. But if I'm just starting out with Intune and I want to start to master it, to really understand the fundamentals, what kind of direction should I head in?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the common mistake that I see a lot of admins make is they try and learn everything at once. And I think that sort of contributes to maybe a few things. I won't put a number on it, because whenever I put a number on it, I end up like blowing the number out of the water, come up with like 100 things. But I think it contributes to sort of a few things. I think the first thing that it does is it gets admins overwhelmed. So it promotes like lift and shift. It goes from, how do I make this work in Intune the way that it needs to work for my organization, to, this is a migration project. Let me just move everything from the left side to the right side. And this is one of the huge issues we have. Settings is a perfect example. The number of people I see lift and shift GPOs, I probably once a month, I get involved with some sort of scenario where we find a setting people didn't know existed in their Intune environment, and it was a result of a lift and shift activity. And, it sounds like I probably sound like a broken record at this point, but actually looking at the scenarios that you need and what you need to accomplish with Intune in your environment versus lifting and shifting everything from on-prem to the cloud or from point A to point B is probably the biggest value add most people can give to their enterprise, right? It's a lot of work. I'm not discounting the work. So, we've had 40 years to make a mess on-prem, and it can be hard untangling the 40 years of mess. I'm not saying that, but there's a couple different strategies that some folks, some of my peers talk about, things like starting fresh in the cloud, things like, starting with a cloud native approach and bringing over just what you need. There's no one size fits all for every organization. It's really an organization by organization thing. But I think the first thing is like, hey, take bite-sized chunks, right? Like, the most common thing we see people start with is compliance, right? Know how Intune can contribute to your compliance stature as an organization, right? And when I talk about compliance, I'm talking about device compliance specifically here. This is something that wasn't on-prem in its current form in the cloud, and it's something that's value add. It's usually something that everybody in security can get on board with, everybody in management can get on board with. It's what I call like the great unifier. So taking these bite-sized chunks, moving to Intune for what's needed, and then gradually going there over time is the key point. And, that allows you to learn at a pace that you can consume, right? You're not trying to migrate 2 million apps from on-prem to the cloud and it becomes a migration. You're thinking like, hey, what do I still need to package and deploy? What can I just get from the vendor now? Like, do I really need to package every Google Chrome update? Is that really a good use of my time? Or do I need to package every, whatever update, right? Or can I move to a different distribution model? And this sort of stuff is only possible if you're looking at your organization's requirements versus, doing that lift and shift sort of mentality. So that's the first thing. The second thing is there are so many smart people in the community. Like Rue, you're one of them. We have a whole MVP community. There's so much historical knowledge on what people need to do that sometimes you can get into information overload, right? I mean, I was just thinking about this recently that our MVPs, at least in the management sector, are usually probably somewhere between 2 to 4 years ahead of most customers, right? Because they're always on the bleeding edge. And it's like by the time we get to, by the time you as a customer or somebody as a customer starts consuming some of their content that they've written, it might be 18 months, 2 years old. So the good part about the community that exists around our management product is that they love to engage. They love to talk. They love to help, right? And it can be really, I guess, intimidating maybe to reach out to some folks, go to conferences, talk to people, but just learning, from those, sort of pieces of collateral, but also being a learn-it-all when it comes to consuming this content is pretty key. And then I guess I'll do 3 because I'm a rule of 3s guy. Anybody who knows me knows that I do rule of 3s. And the last thing is you should just jump in. There's a lot of reasons not to do it. There's always going to be reasons not to do it, but jump in, learn how, you can add value to your organization. I think the other thing that I see a lot in the IT field, I've been in it for a long time now, which is weird. I'm getting old. But, there's sort of this legacy sort of thought that hey, this tool's my life, right? And if we migrate to something new, then maybe I'm not going to be as happy as a person, or I'm not going to be maybe as valuable to my organization. And the exact opposite's actually true. If you are helping move your organization forward, whether that's in security or management, in my opinion, and my experience, your value as a contributor to your organization just quadruples or 10x's, right? You're now the person who's helping, move forward, because the threats aren't slowing down. The threats don't care that, you're comfortable using an old tool. The threats want you to use legacy things, right? It's easier to attack something that's been in market a really long time. So let's move to newer practices, newer tactics and procedures for management. Yeah. Does that make sense? Was that what you were going after? I sort of
rambled. Yeah. No, that's not rambling at all. That was really, really helpful. And so I guess just to kind of summarize your top 3 then. So the first off is that you don't have to bite off more than you can chew. I guess insofar as you mentioned compliance as the great unifier, which is awesome. I'm going to steal that one because it is true insofar as, and I was actually talking on the last episode of this show to Merrill on the Intra team, and it's kind of device compliance is so fundamental to securing everything to do with Intra. So it's at least start there, get your devices either co-managed or hybrid joined or whatever, just find a way to get the ball rolling on compliance. And then your second point there is leaning on the community. And would you mention that? It really made me think. I love that point you mentioned where a lot of the MVPs and the bloggers and things, they might be 3, 4, 5 years ahead of where your average customer is at, but that gives them 3, 4, 5 years to understand it and master it. And a lot of these guys, there are certain names, I'll just call out one of them, Rudy Ooms, who's this kind of Terminator-like machine to do with Intune blogging. You hit him up on Twitter about anything to do with it, and they're more than happy to help, right? So it's there's a whole community there that's ready to help you. And then your third point there, I guess, is just that it's kind of although first point is don't bite off more than you can chew, the third point is also, I guess it's still quite easy to just get started with this stuff, right? You grab a trial license, you grab some test devices, and just jump in and break it, lab it out, figure it out, and then just repeat that in prod. So yeah, totally great advice there.
Yeah, no worries. Yeah. And I can't escape Rudy. Everywhere I go, he's everywhere. So he's now made it into this episode. Rudy, if you're watching this, I love you, buddy. So yeah, there we go. All right. Cool.
Yep. Yeah. No, he knows more. Sometimes I feel like he knows more about EPMs and device compliance than probably a lot of the people on this planet. And in any event, listen, we should probably wrap this up. Matt, it was fantastic chatting with you. I really appreciate your time. If folks, do you have anything you want to plug? Where folks find you online? Anything to promote?
Yeah, I'm on Twitter. I'm not as active as I always love to be, but I'm always there if you guys need any help. So you can hit me up at Device Deploy. Intune support on Twitter is fantastic. The team does a great job there. So if we can help at all, I often say the only bad feedback is the feedback we don't hear. So give us feedback early, often. We listen, and we really want to make sure that we can help you secure your organization and manage your devices. So excited to hear from everybody. Thanks for having me on, Rue. I really appreciate it. I'm love to do it again sometime if there's something that comes up. But yeah, thanks everyone. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, no, thanks again, Matt. If anyone's watching this, listen to this, make sure you subscribe on whatever medium you're watching or listening to this to. Give us a like, share us, all that good stuff. Feed that algorithm. It really helps us out. So Matt, thank you again for joining me.